What we're going to take a look at here in this demo is we're going to take a look at the actual DNS server role. We've already installed it, so now we're going to go ahead and do the next step of configuring this role, or at least we're going to show you how it's configured. What we're seeing on here is we are seeing the DNS manager. What we're going to do is in DNS manager we're going to go through and take a look at some of our configuration tasks. First of all, some of your configuration, depending on what you need to be done or do, can be done up here at the server one, at the where I have called server one. I can go ahead and do some of my configuration tasks there by right clicking and doing properties. What this will allow me to do is, for example, interface that this system will respond to queries on. So you can see on here, if something comes in and is pointed to this IP address, it will go ahead and be able to access DNS. You can also note in there that the interface also specifically calls out an IP6 address on there. So what you're seeing is the same interface that is referred to by two specific IP addresses. We also have the ability to configure forwarders where we can go through and tell it, well, if we can't resolve something here, send it onto this server. We have an advanced setting that allows us to do some higher level DNS configuration options. Root hints, if you need to configure those, you can see on here it's already been done for you, but you can go through and very easily add additional ones on there if the desire comes up or a need comes up to do so. Go ahead and cancel out of that. These three tabs you have in there: debug, event, and monitoring. For the most part, you really don't have to pay attention to them unless you are doing troubleshooting. And yes, we will be talking about troubleshooting a bit in here, but for the most part you'll forget about these until you have some sort of troubleshooting action going on, or it'll be one of the tools that's used to help troubleshoot DNS. So we're going to go ahead and click cancel out of that. Other things we can go through and do is you can see a bunch of other options we have in here. I can create a new zone, new forward lookup zone, for example, if I want. So here's the new zone wizard. I'm going to go ahead and click next. I'm going to say, oh, well, I want to have a primary zone hosted here so it can be readable and writable. I want it to be forward lookup, so it does name to IP. What's the zone name? Well, I can type in a zone name in here. Go ahead and click next. Here's where it's going to store this information in this zone file. So I'm going to go ahead and click next, accept the default. Dynamic updates, I'm not going to allow that, or I could allow it depending on what my options were. The idea being dynamic updates is if a system needs to update its record, if it's, for example, its IP addresses change, or its IP address changes rather, will it be able to update its record in DNS? Well, right here, no. You'll have to go do that manually. You could go through and have it update its stuff in DNS or its record in DNS manually, or automatically if you wanted. If you're a client and you got an IP address, you could automatically register or to change to your record. You could do that, but since it's not secure, it leaves potential issue in there where someone could get a record registered on the network and have stuff being resolved to them. So we don't really want that. So we'll just leave that do not allow dynamic updates. I'll click next. I'll configure the information that I just typed in, which is correct. I click finish, and what will happen here is when I expand out forward lookup zones, you can see my zone file actually residing there. So I could do the same thing for reverse lookup too. I haven't done that, and I won't be doing that here. We'll be looking at this last one, conditional forwarders, later on, one of our next demos on here. So this is really going through and working with configuring, or some of the configuration tasks you might have to do initially. You can see by right clicking on here there's other things we can do, setting aging and scavenging, how long it's going to keep records, how many times we'll update them. We have that. You can see other settings we have in there, tasks that you can have out there. Take a look at this one, configure a DNS server. This one will go through and help you out and do part of what we just talked about. Now what we just did by going through the wizard for creating a DNS zone just created one zone for us. But what we're doing on here is that, oh, well, we want to create a forward and a reverse lookup zone. Well, I could use the wizard I just had, or I could do this and say, just go in here and say create a forward and reverse lookup zone. Click next and say, oh, yes, I want to create one now. Do I want to create another primary? Yep, I could do that. And I could put in the name for this guy in here. Click next. Okay, there's the file just like we had before. I click next and saying, okay, I'm not going to allow dynamic updates to it. Click next again. Create a forward or create a reverse lookup zone. What type is it? No, it's a primary. It's IP4. We're going to go through and type in, the initial part of this reverse lookup zone. I click next. Here's the file it's going to store that in. Not going to allow dynamic updates. Click next. And do we want to configure forwarders? No, we're not going to configure forwarders. Click next. Check to see if the root hints are there and how they're configured. So we're going for that. Now the idea behind this configure a DNS server wizard is that it gets you through the initial setup tasks much quicker and gets this thing running and off the ground. You don't have to use it. There might be a number of you out there that already go through and do this or have done this so many times that you want to be all hands on with it. Totally fine, you still can do that, but this is something else that will help you do that, those configuration tasks in a much easier manner if you so desire. So I'm going to go ahead and click finish out of that. It's going to say, okay, couldn't configure root hints. Well, that's fine, we've already got root hints on there, so I'm not going to worry about that. So if I look under my forward and reverse lookup, you can see that I have reverse lookup in here that I just created, and you can see the forward lookup that I just created is up here. So right now I've already gone through and I've showed some of the initial configuration tasks that I have to do with my DNS server.